Hello, I am Dr. Leslie Werpsa, the co-owner of Rampart Professional Solutions, an academic coaching and editing company. I'm here today to talk to you about positionality and qualitative research. This short lecture has three components, basically. They might intersect. The basic premises and the reasons why would you ever include positionality in your qualitative research? What is this thing called positionality? Second, I would also like to address some of the ongoing debates around insiders, outsiders, regarding positionality, who gets to speak for whom and how. Finally, we will look a little bit about the ways that we can actually effectively incorporate positionality into our research questions and our paradigms, because I think the goal of tackling this task is to become top quality, respectful, ethical researchers who keep their subjects, participants, co-researchers, people we engage with in research safe, and that we actually produce something that can promote change, positive change. This can get very complicated when you are actually engaged in the environment as a professional with the people you're engaging with in research. We'll look at some of that. First, why would we reflect on where we come from as researchers? And why would we reflect on where the people that we are engaging with in research come from? Where did that come from? In short, it came originally from critiques about power and positivism, and could we be objective in our research? There was a long-standing tradition of believing that the researcher was able to be purely objective and divorced from the research process. That comes from, I'm sure you've looked at some of the quantitative histories of research and positivism in your analyses in this class. But I think there was a shift that happened, partially starting academically in the 1970s, going back way earlier with colonialism, but we're going to talk about that. I think one of the best definitions of why we need to look at this comes from a scholar that I profoundly respect. She's a Maori, which means she's an indigenous person. And she has a really interesting book called Decolonizing Methodologies, which get at that really gritty intersection of power when people who are outsiders come to research what's going on with indigenous communities. But she said it most succinctly, and it's been instructive to me for a long time. So she says that research is not an innocent or distant exercise, but an activity that has something at stake and occurs in a set of political and social conditions. And I would say economic conditions, I would say geographic conditions. Conditions, I think what we're talking about here is conditions of power. We as researchers, I mean, most of us don't think of ourselves, as she's critiquing, as colonializing the people that we're engaging within when we're researching, but we do have power as researchers. I think that's why your advisors are asking you to think about where you come from. I think we have a common goal. I think that the reason for examining positionality is because we do want to make a contribution, a valid one, an ethical one that keeps the people that we're engaging with as we do our research safe. We bring the best out of them, the closest we can get to truth or reality or the circumstance or the environment or the institutional practices or whatever your methodology is. I think if we think about approaching the reasons why we do positionality of thinking about our intent, then it shifts things. It gets a little bit easier. But it means that we need to think about being critical, empathic, and curious researchers. Who are we when we walk into that room when we interview somebody? That's a really good question. How are they going to think about who we are? If we're looking at interpretivist, constructivist paradigms, we come to a really interesting definition of positionality is that it's iterative. What I bring to the table, what you bring to the table, I can't just really easily extract information from you. No, the way that we interact matters. And so thus, we must look at power. This recently, and I just want to put this out there for those of you who are going deeper into looking at methods, is that in a lot of circles it's been called intersectionality. The origins come from postmodern, postcolonial, and particularly feminist thinkers across disciplines, by the way. I'm an IR, international relations person, but I've delved into sociology and anthropology, and so feminists, for some reason, have to really think across borders. It's a concept that acknowledges, and I think this comes from actually an article you might have read in your class by Carlton Parsons, the complex and relational roles of race, class, and I would add complex economic inequalities in our global world today, but gender and other socially constructed identities and beings. So to put it simply, as one of the most brilliant methodologists I work with during my graduate studies is, we all walk around with theories in our heads and assumptions about what we think about other people and what we think about people we're studying and how we think about the ways that things should be. And I do believe that that's the exercise of your own positionality, or how we think research should be being done and for what purpose. If we actually acknowledge that, then we can be more honest, ethical researchers. I think that's why you're being asked to think about what you bring to the table. This brings up a really interesting question about do you do this just in the proposal? So I write this positionality statement and I'm over and done with it? No, I actually think it has to be an iterative, integrative, constantly reflexive process. And when I say constantly reflexive, that's because you have to reflect all across the board about how you as a researcher has power as you walk through the research process. From the time you think about your topic, you come to thinking about that topic. What matters? Why does my topic matter? You're bringing something to the table. As you formulate your question, how are you formulating that question? In whose interest? For whom? What is the purpose of your research? That does affect how you frame your question. Then you're going to go and interview people or look at documents and which documents you choose, who you choose to interview, your purposive samples. It matters. You have a lot of power as a researcher. I think that's what I want to keep constant in this discussion. Then, even bigger power accrues when you enter into the categorizing. You get to decide how you name how people are thinking about things. That's a really big one. But I think most of your programs have very good procedural opportunities for member checking in that. Are my categories accurate? Am I biased? Am I putting my own value system? Am I imposing it on this? Those are the kinds of things you just need to ask all along. It doesn't have to be that hard. I do suggest a couple of tools. That was the interpretation part. While you're doing that process, I highly suggest journaling. Why not? Oh my goodness, today I never realized, my own research was with very opposed actors, indigenous peoples in Latin America and multinational oil corporations. You can imagine the conundrums that I had doing both my IRB and my own data interpretation, but I learned that I had to constantly check myself and say, I must sit at the feet of both the powerful and the allegedly vulnerable actors with the same honesty and integrity of where I come from. So I think that this is maybe the bane of what I want to get across here, is that this reflexivity must be constant. When you decide to do something with your results, like, oh my goodness, you found some amazing things out about the people that you're studying. I would like to go back and just have one caveat. Some of you are going to be in very complex research situations where the authority structures, are you the boss of the people you're interviewing? I've had one case where the person was the teacher who was interviewing students. Those things, there's an insider-outsider thing. Both being inside and outside bring really good things to the research process, but you just have to be cognizant of that. And because it affects how you're going to be interacting with the people that you're trying to understand. In sum, we need to be very cognizant that how we choose our questions, how we collect our data, these things, if we are not aware of who we are walking into this and how we interpret our data, how we categorize our coding. Many of you in qualitative research are going to be doing a lot of coding. Are you acting as an insider or an outsider? I think we can do really good research if we ask ourselves those questions. And the debates have come down that, yes, we need to enter into a dialogue, a profound dialogue that recognizes power. And if it recognizes it up front when you publish your wonderful article, or you say in that policy document, this is who I am, there's going to be a very profound admiration for the results that you produce. Because you said, this is where I'm coming from. That's going to be of interest, both to academics, to policymakers, to practitioners. So if you can recognize that from the start, I think that's what positionality is all about. And we have to remember that the complex ways of the pursuit of knowledge, which is what we want, knowledge to make the world better, I do believe, we come to the table with who we are and where we've come from. That could be an asset, that can be a liability. But I think what's really important is that we recognize the interstices of where it can be one or the other. So just constantly ask yourself, am I going after knowledge and data? For whom? For what? For what purpose? If you constantly do that, then ethical research is possible. I don't want people to get stalled, and this is part of the debate over insider outsider, thinking, just because I'm a white person raised in suburbia, I can't interview indigenous peoples. I didn't let that block me in my own research. I just asked the questions. I asked for mentorship and asked how to work through them in a way that would be most academically, ethically, and practically responsible to the people with whom I engaged and the communities in my research. Thank you very much.